Tracie Andrews was born on the 9th of April 1969 in the West Midlands.
Well, Tracie was brought up just outside Birmingham in Redditch and Alvechurch, and she was the middle child. She had an older sibling and a younger sibling and several half-siblings. And her parents broke up when she was around about 6 years old because they'd had quite a volatile relationship.
The separation of her parents in 1975 had a lasting effect on young Tracie.
Well, Tracie's parents split up and her mother got married to another man. And when we look at our parents' relationships, they are quite important because they inform our expectations of other people, our expectations of the relationships that we go on to have.
Kids need attention, you know, they need to be loved and cuddled and everything. And a lot of kids that come from those kind of broken homes, and the case of Tracie, they want to be loved by mother, father, or somebody. So that is definitely, in my opinion, one of the things that pushed her into always wanting the attention of other men.
Tracie left school in 1986, and aged 21, she had a baby daughter. But the relationship with her partner lasted barely a year, and they soon went their separate ways.
What we've got here is a woman who doesn't like her partners having a life that doesn't involve her. She doesn't like her partners going out without her. She gets very jealous, she's very possessive.
She certainly had a temper. Everybody who knew her said she had a temper, and when she lost her temper, everybody knew about it. She would shout at the top of her voice. The whole street would hear.
By 1994, 25-year-old Tracie was living in a council flat in Alvechurch and working as a barmaid. But her aspirations went far beyond pulling pints.
She had visions, she had dreams of becoming a model, but and you know, she was very photogenic. She looked good on camera, and she knew it, and she had some pictures taken and a photo album put together, but that never really took off either.
She became a barmaid, working in a pub, but she still dressed very provocatively, and she still loved talking to men and chatting to men. Again, seeking the attention that she wanted to get as a model, because obviously when you're that pretty and you're a model, you do get a lot of attention.
Living nearby to Tracie was 23-year-old Lee Harvey. He also had a daughter from a previous relationship.
Lee Harvey was a young man from a very close family, and he worked as a bus driver for the West Midlands Travel. So this was a job that involved meeting many people on a daily basis. He was very outgoing. He was interested in cars and was always very well turned out. So he was your typical young Birmingham lad, essentially. Very close to his mum, very close to his sister.
The paths of the two young single parents would soon cross.
Well, Lee and Tracie met in October 1994 in Ritzy's nightclub in Birmingham, and this relationship really did develop at a lightning pace. They had moved in with one another only around 3 months into the relationship, so this was going very, very fast. And their relationship was quite a volatile one. They were both quite possessive, quite jealous when it came to the other's relationships with the opposite sex. And you often find this in relationships that develop very quickly. You haven't got that foundation of trust that's been built. You're always a little bit kind of suspicious as to what the other person's up to because you don't really know them.
And they would row, and they would fight like cat and dog. And neighbours would report how voices would be raised at all hours of the day and night, and would go on and on for hours, and then stop, and then start again.
The couple got engaged after just 6 months, but their volatile relationship would often see them break up, only to get back together again soon after.
It was maybe almost a carbon copy of what Tracie grew up with in her house. She had a very explosive temper, and Lee Harvey also, in a way, wouldn't like just bow down to her screaming, so he would scream back.
She was forever throwing him out into the street, and she would throw his clothes out of the window or in a black bin bag and chuck him out the front door, change the locks. And then they would have reconciliations. Lee would go back, more violence, Lee would leave, Lee would go back, more violence. This went on for a period of about 2 years.
Their explosive relationship finally came to a head on December the 1st, 1996.
So they'd been rowing all day. Lee tended to be the peacemaker, and it was probably Lee's suggestion, why don't we go for a drink? Why don't we just get a change of scene, a breath of fresh air? Let's get out of here, let's just go and relax and have a drink. And that's what they did.
But Lee Harvey would never make it home again. By 11 p.m. he would be dead. The only witness to the fatal altercation was his fiancée Tracie Andrews, and her version of events would soon make it one of the most talked about murders of the decade. On December the 3rd, 1996, 27-year-old Tracie Andrews appeared at an emotionally charged press conference in an appeal to find the passenger of a Ford Sierra who she claimed had stabbed her fiancé Lee Harvey to death. But unbeknownst to Andrews, the police were beginning to work out the truth, that she had been the one responsible for the murder of 25-year-old Lee.
It's self-preservation. That's what's driving her behaviour at this point in time. She's got absolutely no empathy whatsoever for Lee or for Lee's family, or indeed for her own family, who are also going to be really badly affected by this. So she's thinking, how do I best preserve myself? I'm going to take that role of the victim and I'm going to put myself in it.
Andrews' claim that she and Lee had been the victim of a road rage incident didn't seem to add up. A witness statement from a child staying in a house on Cooper's Hill put her version of events in doubt.
It was December, the windows were closed, but she could clearly hear a row going on. What she remembered was that one was a distinctly male baritone voice. The other voice was much softer. And she said it was much more like a woman's voice.
Forensic searches of the road had discovered more clues into what really happened.
We couldn't get anywhere near the scene on the first morning, or indeed for a few days afterwards. The police completely sealed it off while they drafted in officers to carry out a fingertip search of the area. What they found, we later discovered, were a couple of bits and pieces, including a tiny spring and another element from a multifunction penknife. What police didn't find was any trace of a car overtaking another car on the soft December winter verges of this pretty narrow road.
Police had also found a black beanie hat in the hedgerow next to where Lee's car had been parked.
So our assumption was, well, this has maybe fallen out of the assailant's pocket and he's not realised it. So of course that went to the laboratory fairly quickly with a view towards DNA and from hair samples, that sort of thing. And we had the report back by the Wednesday that this was animal hair, and it was cat hair, black and white cat hair. Well, there's a black and white cat at Tracie's. And so we went down and took a sample of hair from the cat, and it was the cat hair. And then, as I understand it later on, it was accepted that this was Lee's hat, but had been in Tracie's pocket prior to the offence taking place.
Andrews' lie about the hat was just one of many inconsistencies in her story.
In Lee's hand, they found between 80 and 100 strands of Tracie's hair that have been pulled from Tracie's head as Lee has tried to defend himself. Now, if Lee had been murdered by this fat man with staring eyes, why would he have Tracie's hair in his hand?
Well, the pathologist's evidence was that this was more than just a death grasp stroking, that it was a reasonable clump, that it had a good pull. But of course, Tracie's view was, well, this must have been when he was going and he got his hand on my hair, you know. So it came as a sort of, as Lee was passing away, he'd pulled some hair from her head.
Her story really was starting to crumble at that point in time, and combined with her suicide attempt, I think the police decided that's enough evidence. We can now move in and arrest her.
On Saturday, December the 7th, 1996, 6 days after Lee's murder, Tracie Andrews was arrested in hospital and taken into custody.
The 27-year-old woman was arrested at 11 o'clock today, but so far detectives have released no further details. Until this development, the police had been looking for 2 men who they believe may have escaped from the scene in a dark Ford Sierra.
The evidence from the 2 witnesses who'd seen Lee Harvey's vehicle through the junction that night was extremely impactful. And realistically, without a following vehicle, without a dark-coloured Ford Sierra chasing that car, then the whole being of that explanation from Tracie just didn't stand up.
Further evidence pointed towards Andrews being the killer after the clothes she was wearing on the night of the murder were forensically tested.
The forensic scientist who had examined one of Tracie's zip-up boots, she had a pair of ankle boots on, and within that he'd found a mark in the leather which had a rounded top on it and seemed to bear all the impression of the outside shape of the knife. And that's the hypothesis, that she carried the knife away from the scene in her boot, and that as soon as she got to the hospital she was able to dispose of it.
She could have easily just like thrown the knife into the grass or into the forest, whatever it was, and hope the police wouldn't find. But she even thought, no, these guys are gonna bring dogs, they're gonna, search the whole area, they will probably find something.
Tracie Andrews was officially charged with the murder of Lee Harvey on December the 19th, 1996.